Welcome to Tales by Jin. I'm Jin, and you're listening to the Tales of Lux and Cor Gwyndolyn series. This is Adulthood Part 1, the 7th episode in the series. Sit back, relax, and let yourself be whisked away as we return to the world of Tenebrae to follow Gwyndolyn on her continued adventures in the Dragon Wastes of Cor and beyond.
Chris, please, say something.
Gwyndolyn pleaded with the emaciated kobold, but he remained motionless beyond frighteningly shallow breaths. Rain poured down around them, and thunder shook the sky. This was not what she meant when she said they needed water. If she was one to believe in gods, she was sure they were laughing at her now. What hubris, that she would finally be free of the clan that suffocated her and abused Chris, only for them to drown in a muddy puddle in the middle of nowhere.
This is what happens when you betray the clan. You die cold and alone with your snout in the dirt,
they'd say when they found their bodies. If they found their bodies. What she needed now was less bitching and more moving. It was getting colder by the minute, and she still hadn't found a suitable cave. A kobold without a cave was like a turtle without a shell, short-lived. But there weren't many to be had just beyond the border grass, and the few there were more hollows than caves, too shallow to provide protection from the elements and support basic kobold comforts. Gwyn touched her forehead to Chris's. It was far too warm, despite his paws being so clammy. This sad excuse for a tree wasn't cutting it. She needed to get him out of this chilling rain. She wrapped him in her dancing silks as best she could to keep him warm and dry, but she knew the gossamer cloth would do little of either. But it was all she had, and if she fed a mild current through it, it would keep him conscious. That, above all else, was the most important. Until she found them a suitable cave, she could not let him slip away. She touched her forehead to his once more and stood.
I'll be right back, okay? Stay awake for me. I promise I'll have a home for us when I come back.
Chris, ever so slightly, nodded, and Gwyn ran. Or tried to. The howling wind she was familiar with. That was common in the Dragon Wastes. The crackling lightning and roaring thunder even more so. But the torrential rain turning dust and dirt to churning mud was unknown. Every step she took, she felt her energy sapped by the sucking slime the earth had become beneath her. Her breath came heavy, rising as ephemeral puffs of cloud before her eyes. If she wasn't moving forward, she was shivering with her tail wrapped around her core. The rain continued to pound the earth like a million tiny hammers all around her as she realized, legs shaking, she was running out of time. Lightning flashed, and, for the briefest moment, every raindrop hung suspended in air, shining like crystal in the blinding light. Gwyn slammed her claws over her ear holes just as thunder exploded all around her, reverberating around and through her, shaking the very breath from her lungs. She doubled over in the mud, coughing as her diaphragm fought to reclaim the air stolen from them. And once her breathing calmed, she looked up to where the lightning had struck. There before her, despite the torrents falling from above, was a burning tree drooping over an embankment. A familiar embankment with just enough of a hollow at its base that could serve as, at the very least, a dry place to weather the storm. Running was out of the question. What little energy she had left needed to be conserved for carrying Chris. light as he was, it wasn't just him, but both of them, that was starving nearly every day since they left their clan. He just had a head start, thanks to his oh-so-loving grandmother. She returned, and he was just as she left him. She knelt and touched her forehead to his.
I found a place.
He exhaled just a bit harder.
I know. I'm excited to get out of this shit too. Come on, I'll carry you there.
With a bit of effort, she managed to pick up the mostly limp body of Chris. Step by sodden step, they trekked back to the hollow Gwyn had found earlier. The rain had doused the lightning-struck tree by the time they arrived, and they made their way inside. Once they were as deep as the hollow went, she set Chris down and collapsed next to him. Her breathing was almost as shallow as his.
It's not much, I know.
Gwyn wheezed as she struggled to pull herself closer to Chris. What little body heat they had between them needed to stay between them.
But it's dry. We'll sleep here. And tomorrow, I'll get us food, and then...
A single claw pressed against her lips.
Right.
Thunder roared through the night as two kobolds, clanless and starved, succumbed to their exhaustion in each other's arms. Gwyn jolted upright out of her restless sleep. Grogginess dampened her senses, but she could not shake the feeling that something was amiss. The rains had finally stopped, but the lack of bone-rattling thunder and sizzle of raindrops outside their hollow wasn't what roused her. She flung her blanket aside and... Blanket? Like a roach exposed from under a lifted stone, Gwyn skittered to the other side of the hollow. Opposite her was Chris, still sleeping soundly under the mystery blanket. Where had it come from? Best she could recall, there was nothing in the hollow, not when she first arrived, nor when she returned with Chris. It wasn't that deep, so she couldn't have missed something no matter how exhausted she was. But supposing she had, wouldn't she have smelt the musty odor of a long-forgotten blanket in a shallow, damp hollow? Gwyn sniffed gently at the air and became frustrated with the lack of musty blanket smell. In fact, it smelled earthy and warm, like fresh-turned soil with a hint of sun-baked slab of stone. That wasn't the smell of abandoned goods. Gwyn, as a kobold, a race of scavengers, knew the smell of rot and abandonment well. This was the smell of something that was kept and cared for, and owned. By who or what, she had no idea. Clanmates, former clanmates, shouldn't have been able to find them. She made sure of that with the roundabout paths she developed and took during her solo runs through the bordergrass as a scout. So it wasn't feasible that even a friendly kobold found them and took pity on the pair with a blanket and left them be. But if not a kobold, then who? Or what? Gwyn crawled back towards Chris, sniffing the ground all the way. There was a scent that lingered on the blanket, that earthy, loamy smell. But that was confusing because it didn't smell like anything she had ever encountered before. When she smelled things, she could smell the life on them. The organic smells that indicated something living and breathing had interacted with an object recently, and decay had not set in. The blanket lacked that scent of decay in any stage. It was clearly owned by something living. That's what her nose told her. But by what? The ground? Frustration curled Gwyn's lips back as a growl escaped her throat. And in that moment, something shifted in the deepest part of the hollow. Gwyn charged towards it, claws and fangs bared, and found herself staring at a bare stone wall. Well, almost bare. There was a small crack that ran up the center that a handful of pebbles trickled down from. Though, on closer inspection, perhaps crack was the wrong word. Natural cracks meandered, spidered through stonework, jagged like lightning. This was too straight. This was a line, a seam, sort of like the lines left behind when Willem manipulated stone. Though Willem wouldn't have left them wrapped in a blanket. Willem would have left them in a stone grave. Besides, the blanket didn't smell like bastard. Gwyn sniffed, first the air, then the seam in the stone. It smelled earthy. Not stone earthy, but live earthy, like the blanket. She huffed, then ambled back to the still sleeping form of Krys. Seems we had a visitor in the night, she mused to herself. One capable of manipulating stone. But whoever they were, they didn't smell like kobold, or any other living thing she had encountered before. This was a mystery, though right now she didn't have the energy to spare it so long as the mystery remained benevolent and, above all, hidden. More pressing was that she needed to secure some food and clean water now that the rain had stopped and the skies were as warm as they got beneath the veil. Once she and Krys were no longer in danger of starving or dehydrating to death, then she would pursue their earthen ghost, so long as it remained not a threat anyway. With one last look to the back of the hollow, she set out to scavenge what she could with what little strength remained. The blanket kept them warm, sure, but they couldn't eat it. How funny that would be if she came back to food and drink just waiting for her. Taking off along the ridge that housed their hollow, Gwyn laughed. No one was that generous. Not in the waste, not to strangers, and certainly not to kobolds.
I'm telling you, it was there when I woke up. You were gone, I was wrapped in a blanket, and the food and water was just there. I thought you had left it.
Gwyn stared dumbfounded at what lay before her. As Krys said, there was food and water just sitting there before them in two large stone bowls. One was full, well, mostly full, of water, and the other contained various things, among which was food. There were leaves, berries, dried meats, chunks of hard cheeses, but also a variety of mundane and semi-precious stones.
You didn't eat anything, did you?
No, I mean, I thought you brought it, so I, drank some of the water. That's all I could manage though at first. Then, once I was feeling a little better, you came back.
Sighing, Gwyn plopped down next to Krys and pulled the water ball in. She looked deep into it. It was the clearest water she had ever seen.
And you feel fine?
Much better than yesterday.
Shrugging, she dipped her snout in and downed a few gulps herself. The instant the cool waters hit her stomach, relief washed through her and silent alarms of imminent death ceased. She relaxed for the first time in weeks.
Veil above, I needed that,
she said, followed by a cough as a bit of liquid took the wrong tube.
This food, though.
She pawed through the bowl, picked out a particularly smooth and round ball of gray, porous, igneous stone.
Yeah, I thought maybe the dehydration got to you and...
That's fair. How about we eat around the rocks for now, and I'll figure out where this came from later.
If you're sure.
I'm not, but I couldn't find anything to bring back,
So it's this or starve.
Chris picked out a lump of hard cheese.
I think I've starved enough for now.
For now?
Gwyn nudged Chris in his emaciated ribcage with her elbow, then plucked a strip of mystery jerky from the bowl.
Look, once we get our clan established properly, you'll never starve again. I'll make sure of it.
I know.
Chris bit a chunk out of the cheese he held with some effort, then rested his head on Gwyn's shoulder.
I trust you, Gwyn. We'll make this work somehow.
We sure will.
As she chomped down on her jerky, Gwyn stared at the back of the hollow.
Things will only get better from now on. I can feel it.
As the days trailed on, Chris's condition steadily improved until he was able to walk around on his own and summon enough crystal to protect himself from the odd shadow beast if need be. Still, as much as he insisted, he was not up to the task of foraging. If she was honest with herself, neither was Gwyn, but if she were discovered by anything sentient, she could escape much faster alone. Chris was better off at home, where he could wall up the entrance if anything came creeping along. Not that that stopped threats from inside the walls. Home, Gwyn mused dreamily. Sure, it wasn't much. It wasn't anything at all but a shallow hollow in a ridge beneath a lightning-struck, burnt-out willow. But that was where she and Chris found shelter. That was where they were together, recuperating from their sudden departure from their former clan and gathering strength. And while it wasn't the most traditional of caves, they weren't particularly beholden to tradition. Tradition saw Chris abused and Gwyn neglected. Tradition saw their clan isolated from the world instead of learning from and participating in it. If tradition didn't serve to raise up those that upheld it, what purpose was it actually serving? Gwyn had to admit, though, tradition or not, a deeper cave would be nice. If their clan was to grow at all, they would need a place to gather, to shelter, to be, well, kobolds. And a deeper cave would allow them to safely lay and care for their eggs. Not that Gwyn was thinking about that, no, not at all, just these are things that are going to happen in the future that they would need to prepare for sooner rather than later. No more leaving eggs to be struck by lightning and mauled by the elements. That was one tradition that would not be surviving Gwyn's clan. Putting those thoughts aside, she refocused on the task at hand. Again, she was out in the border grass, looking to scavenge what she could. The food that mysteriously appeared after the storm only lasted a couple days. If she didn't find a more stable source of food and water soon, their recently returning strength would wane once more. And the last thing she wanted was for Chris to starve again. He'd suffered enough at the hands of his grandmother. Gwyn would do better by him, whatever it took. Yes. Her snout picked up the scent of grass trolls. Remembering her first encounter with them, she got as low to the ground as she could and slithered silently forward, looking for stalks of grass growing the wrong way. Instead, she came across footprints first. They seemed to continue forward deeper into the border grass, and so she followed. They led her to another set of prints, then another. Suddenly, a whole mess of prints were crossing this way and that, accompanied by bent and broken stalks of border grass. She didn't have to wonder long about what caused the commotion. There, in the thick of the frenzied footsteps, were prints like her own. Gwyn stiffened as she sniffed once more, fearful of what she might discover. No, these were not scents she recognized. Kobolds, yes, but none she knew, and none from her former clan. Her body relaxed ever so slightly as she pressed on into a clearing, where apparently a fight took place. Blood splattered the tamped-down grass and dirt, but there was a curious lack of bodies. The Shadowscale clan killed indiscriminately, but they only took what they could scavenge off of what they felled. The bodies remained behind to rot, as any meats they consumed were of a bestial variety. This meant that the raid went poorly, and the trolls were able to recover their fallen, or this was a clan with a taste for fellow sapiens. Judging by the wetness of the blood in the area and the lack of any remains whatsoever, it was very likely the latter. And just like that, this was no longer a safe place to be. Taking extra care to sneak as silently as her lithe body allowed, Gwyn crawled back along the trail she had followed to the scene and back out of the border grass. It wasn't long before she was back at the hollow, empty-handed once more. She stopped just outside of view of the mouth of the hollow. How was she supposed to provide for a clan if she couldn't even provide for herself and her mate? Maybe it would have been very dangerous, very risky, but if she had searched the area for anything the trolls or the kobolds had left behind, like a sack of goods or a pouch of rations, anything more than the nothing currently clutched in her claws. Stupid Gwyn. Something stirred inside the hollow, followed by the thunk of stone on stone, and the clatter of various things spreading out over a stone surface. Gwyn looked into the hollow to see Krys still sleeping. Standing over a stone bowl of spilled foodstuffs and pebbles was a humanoid figure. Their skin, what wasn't covered by soot-stained overalls and a shirt with the sleeves rolled up to the bicep, was obsidian black with white marbling. Their polished gem eyes and long hair shone with the same opalescent radiance. Speaking of their hair, it appeared to branch to and from itself, more of a crystalline web resembling hair than the individual hair strands on other humanoids Gwyn was used to. That same kind of opal hair formed a beard so thick that the intruder's nostrils and mouth were completely obscured by it. Oh, right. This was an intruder. They turned to run. Gwyn ran faster. They collided in the back of the hollow, with Gwyn pinning the intruder's arms against the wall with her claws. They didn't seem to be very strong, or even to be resisting all that much, though they felt cool to the touch. Cold even. Painfully so. Gwyn leapt back and hissed, fangs and claws bared at this home invader. They, meanwhile, gingerly lifted both hands in the universal sign of surrender without further struggle.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
Gwyn continued to growl, but couldn't resist tilting her head ever so slightly at the strange sound she didn't understand. She couldn't understand the words per se, but that defeated tone was unmistakable.
I'm sorry, the intruder said. I didn't mean to hurt you. Are your hands okay?
This time, Gwyn couldn't resist the full head tilt.
Your hands.
When it was clear she wasn't understanding what they were saying, the intruder, very slowly and deliberately, used one hand to point to the other, then pointed down to Gwyn's claws. She looked down at them, shook them out and flexed them.
Was that some sort of spell? Ice magic? Try something like that again and I'll kick you right through that wall.
So she threatened, but her hesitant posturing remained unchanging.
You don't happen to speak Koran, do you? You, aren't threatening to kill me, are you? Considering you're a kobold, and you haven't yet.
The intruder began to lower their hands. Gwyn intensified her growl. Those black marble hands returned to their original height.
It seems like you're trying to communicate,
Gwyn said, lowering her guard ever so slightly as a shock of the sudden cold left her claws.
But I don't think you understand me. Or, you. But I don't think you're a real threat. I think, if anything, you're the one that left us water and food, with rocks in.
In that moment, the adrenaline left Gwyn's system, and all her fatigue returned at once. Her posture sagged, but she remained standing before the intruder.
Are you? Did you leave the provisions before? Did you come back to leave more?
Opal.
Gwyn looked up at the creature whose arms were beginning to tremble with the effort of keeping them aloft.
Is that a yes, or...
Opal considered for a moment, then shook her head. She pointed to herself.
Opal.
Then she pointed to Gwyn.
Name?
This got her a blank stare from the grayish-blue kobold before her. The second time received another head tilt. The third time, Gwyn finally put together what the heck this person was trying to convey. She pointed at Opal.
Opal?
Then raised her arms and slowly lowered them. An odd sort of excitement bubbled up within her when this Opal person followed suit and lowered her arms as well. Gwyn, a kobold, was communicating with an outsider. They couldn't really understand each other, but this was something. This was more than anyone of her clan had ever accomplished before. This was surreal. Gwyn plopped down on her backside with the weight of it all. Then she pointed down, indicating for Opal to do the same. She couldn't keep her tail from swishing with excitement when Opal said as well.
Opal,
she said once more, feeling out the word with her kobold mouth while pointing to the owner of the name.
Yes, I'm Opal,
she said, pointing to herself.
And you are? What's your name? Name?
Name.
Gwyn touched a claw to the tip of her snout.
Name Gwyndolyn.
Gwyndolyn. That's a beautiful name. Gwyndolyn, can I ask you something?
Gwyn stared in the way a person stares when they've heard their name in passing conversation and have no idea what the conversation was about.
Gwyndolyn, are you going to kill me?
Sensing that asking alone would not be enough, Opal ran a finger across the approximate height of her throat behind her beard, lolled her head to the side, and stuck out a tongue bright orange like heated metal. Understanding dawned on Gwyn, and she quickly waved her hands in front of her and shook her head. It seemed some gestures were universal, as once she did so, Opal visibly relaxed. She wouldn't kill the person responsible for keeping them from the brink of starvation. She couldn't. She also couldn't convey how thankful she was for it, even if there were some rocks in.
Opal,
she said, then pointed back to the food.
Is that your doing? Did you bring that for us?
Oh, the food?
Opal laughed, and it had an undertone of crystals tinkling in the breeze. She nodded.
Yeah, that was me before. And now, but I guess you figured that out. I don't really know what kobolds eat, so I gathered what I could find that I've seen other people eat. Also, threw in some good rocks in case you're like us dwarfs. You look like you needed it more than me.
Gwyn looked from the food back to Opal.
I don't think you can understand me, but...
She lowered her head in what she hoped was a display of thankfulness.
Thank you. I don't know if we would have made it without your help that day. Or today, even. So, thank you.
Oh, Gwyndolyn.
Taking a pair of gloves from a pouch on her overalls, Opal slipped them on and laid a hand on Gwyn's shoulder. The kobold flinched, but relaxed when the biting cold from before never came.
I think you're trying to thank me? Really, it was the least I could do. I've heard stories about kobolds, of course, everyone has. But I couldn't just watch you two waste away like that. If anything, I should be thanking you for not being like the stories I've heard.
Opal laughed her tinkling crystal laugh, and this time Gwyn joined her. It was nothing short of a miracle. Dumb luck. Maybe her clan was right. Maybe kobolds do die on their own without a clan. But that was in a world where it was kobolds against every other living thing in Cor. Here, in this hollow, she and Krys surely would have died just like their clan expected. Instead, they were saved by a stranger simply because they didn't attack on sight. Well, couldn't attack, but the fact of the matter was they were alive. and she was communicating with a creature they had never encountered before. If only Kieran could see her now, half-starved and talking to a dwarf. They may not share a language, but... the book! Gwyn sprung to her feet, scaring a squeak out of the poor startled dwarf. She calmed Opal with a gentle, "Wait here, I'll be right back" gesture, and trotted over to her pack. As she reached it, she glanced over to Chris, still sleeping soundly. Given it was a struggle to keep him awake during the most violent thunderstorm of their lives, it was no wonder he was still sleeping peacefully despite her and Opal's activity. It was probably better that way. As peaceable as Chris was, 2 active kobolds was likely far more intimidating to a lone adventurer than just one. A quick rummage through her meager belongings, and the book was in hand. She brought this back to Opal and sat before her, book extended.
Oh, what's this?
After Gwyn nudged the book toward her and nodded aggressively, Opal picked up the battered thing. She flipped through it with care, noting the pictures and looking up at Gwyn.
This seems to be a primer on various dances. Do you want me to dance?
Gwyn looked down at the open page. The illustration was one she was very familiar with. She tapped it with a claw and shook her head.
No. You don't want me to dance? No dance?
Gwyn tapped the picture again. No. Then she slid her claw over to the text scrawled next to the image and tapped twice, nodding emphatically.
You want me to read the description of the dance?
You want...
Gwyndolyn, I don't think I understand what you're...
I don't think...
Gwyndolyn, what are you... Oh my, well, you want me to teach you Corin.
Again, the words escaped Gwyn, but the tone was telling. That was the voice of someone realizing just what they were being asked.
Oh my, I'm flattered really, but Gwyndolyn, I'm a caver for the banks. I just make new tunnels for the bank to expand into. I'm not... You don't want... Gwyndolyn, me teaching you Corin? Me? Teaching?
Opal teaching Gwyndolyn.
Bright orange patches rose on Opal's cheeks. She did everything in her seated power to avoid Gwyn's ardent gaze.
This can't be real. I meet a kobold for the first time, and instead of killing me, they want me to teach them Corin. This can't be happening. Can't be happening. Can't be happening.
Be happening.
Opal couldn't help it any longer. Her eyes locked with Gwyn's, and she could see something deep within them. A shocking amount of determination flickered beyond those striking green irises. As far as Opal knew, kobolds were part of clans and traveled in groups of 3. They killed on sight. They were savage and evil and terrible, and certainly not the sort to sit down and ask you to teach them to speak your language. Something was very different about this kobold. Something she found herself wanting to help nurture in any way she could. After all, Gwyndolyn didn't kill her as expected. Perhaps she could repay that kindness.
Okay. Yes.
Opal nodded to emphasize the yes.
I'll try to help as best I can. Yes.
Gwyn nodded as well.
Yes.
Yes. Opal will teach Gwyndolyn Corin.
Opal teach Gwyn. Yes.
But I can't stay, okay? I do have my actual job to get back to before they start worrying about me. Actually, I don't think they'd worry. They'd just write me off as another unfortunate lost. And wait, why am I telling you all of this? You can't understand me.
Opal held up one finger. 1. Gwyn held up a claw.
1.
Opal raised a second finger. 2. Gwyn followed suit.
2.
Opal raised a third. 3.
3.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
3 days, and I'll come back, okay?
Opal mimed walking away with her fingers, counted to 3, then walked her fingers back.
3 days, come back, okay? Yes? No?
Gwyn nodded, her brow furrowed.
3 days. Yes, no.
No, not... never mind. 3 days. I'll come back and we'll talk more then. Okay? 3 days.
Feeling somewhat confident that she understood what was being said, Gwyn nodded one last time and stood up. She extended her paw to Opal, who took it in a gloved hand and got to her feet. They both shared an awkward moment of not knowing what to say next and shuffling about until Gwyn broke the silence.
Thank you again for the food and now this. I'll make sure we have our own food supply by the next time you come, so you can focus on teaching me to speak like you instead of sneaking random stuff to strangers. Thank you, Opal.
With that, she bowed her head. Unsure how to proceed, Opal patted the offered head. However confusing, Gwyn did not hate it.
I'll be back in 3 days. Try not to starve before then, Gwyndolyn.
Smiling, she turned toward the wall and waved her hand. The stones split, revealing a tunnel just wide and tall enough to accommodate Opal alone. She entered the tunnel, gave a quick nod to Gwyn, and closed the wall behind her with a flick of the wrist. For a time, Gwyn continued staring at the stone wall before her, sealed as though it was never open to begin with. She stayed in that stunned state until a sleepy voice from behind brought her back to reality.
Gwyn, is that you? What are you doing back there? Where did this food come from? Did you find the intruder?
Yeah,
she said, smiling to herself.
you could say that.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Tales of Lux and Cor, Gwyndolyn. If you liked what you've heard, please be sure to like the video and leave a comment. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to make sure you're notified when new episodes come out. Thanks for stopping by, and may your cave be ever warm.